we're an ultra luxury product. Therefore, I can't market this if it's a 20 something dollar product, right? So it's not even about the fact that we want to look luxury for the commercial to people to understand in the subconscious, but also because it's not authentic to us. Like I couldn't be in like a sports bar and that kind of thing because it's most likely, that audience won't be asking for that kind of premiumness on an average basis on their well tequila. I would love to access that market, but it's a market that for us, it's quite rough. So if I were to set a commercial that it applies to that, it would be really hard. I think, for example, take the opposite end of where we are, Terramana and The Rock. They are super authentic to their market. I always say The Rock understands his audience amazingly and does a great job at that, but we are different.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Be careful you don't engage in marketing color by numbers, so to speak. It's easy to get lost in process flow charts and databases. You could build out that perfect infrastructure. You got the right media buys, marketing automation, drip campaigns. They're all set. Everything is being properly measured and attributed. Oh, but all that work, it's easy to overlook what the infrastructure should be for. That's just marketing color by numbers. So I love this lesson for my next guest, embed creative within your business model. That's why we have that infrastructure, right? To highlight that creative, get it to the right customer at the right time. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Diego Osorio, founder and chief creative officer for Lobos 1707 Tequila. Thanks for joining me, Diego.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
So let's take a quick look at your background so people know who I'm talking to. You've been an actor, a producer, a director, and you jumped in the business world about 4 years ago when you founded Lobos 1707. Lobos 1707 is a privately held company. Investors include LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Draymond Green, and Rich Paul. They've had a product at market for about 3 years now and already have $45 million in revenue. Diego runs the whole company, so he's got about a team of about 80 to 100, he said, depending on the season in his company overall, but 22 people he interacts with directly every day, including his marketing team of 9 and his leadership team of about a dozen. Sounds like you're a busy man, Diego. So give us a sense, what is your day like as Chief Creative Officer?
I think founders can always relate. Founders, every bad thing comes to the founder at some point through the company. We don't get as much of the good things. But I think my biggest job or my biggest duty is the personality of the company, who we are, what we're about, the kind of product that we want to be and the kind of company that we want to represent and be like. I think that's my number one duty. And that comes down to the color of our price stickers to what is our messaging for the next campaign, right?
But I also want to ask, you said all the problems come to you, but you told me you don't use Slack and the phone's on silent. So how do the problems get to you? Like, how does anyone get in contact with you?
I don't know, but I find myself in Zooms from like 8 in the morning to 8 at night. No, like I just keep my phone on silent all the time. I hate the vibration of the calling. And Slack, it takes away so much of the personality of people talking to each other, and it's so open. But I'm losing that battle, Daniel. I think the company will join Slack pretty soon. Every big leadership team meeting, they go, so Slack, and I'm like, yeah, I know. So we'll probably join Slack pretty soon.
Oh, I've got pulled into it. I know. And it's funny. It's like this fake thing of someone visiting you, right? Slack's got that knock and now Zoom's got that doorbell. You feel like someone's actually visiting, but everyone's just on the computer. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at some of the lessons from some of the things you made. So first you mentioned that authenticity should be at the core of a brand. Tell me, how'd you learn this lesson?
Oh, I mean, I come from everything about storytelling, right? So I kind of started this company by accident almost, which is not true. I was very, very passionate. I wanted to, if I was going to pour my life and soul into something apart from acting and directing, it would have to be something I felt very passionate. But what I say is this was never meant to be a company. It was because it was just going to be for my friends and family. It was never going to be. So for me, authenticity and being able to really show what you believe in and being selfish in the product and the way you do it, it's everything. So storytelling has to be part of it, and storytelling at its core has to be authentic.
So give us a sense. How do you tell this authentic story of your brand? Can you take us into like one of your recent campaigns or ads or the branding of it to bring that authenticity into the actual brand?
Absolutely. So I hopefully the team won't kill me, but the one that we just shot, which will come out after the Olympics, it has to be twofold. It has to be something that I think it's going to tell the story of the product and what our characteristics is, which in our case is, Peter Jimenez sherry finish, and it's, we're craft and culture, we all these things that we're proud of, but in a way that we're not taking too serious, right? Because that kind of thing. And also on top of that, there's a little bit of question marks around celebrities endorsing products, right? So what does that mean? So taking all that into a world and then make it feel in the personality that we were talking about, which is, big time my job. Like, we're an ultra luxury product. So it has to feel ultra luxury. It has to feel that way, but it can't be taking ourselves too serious because that's what other brands are doing. And it's not about us in that way. I had to navigate that world, and within all of that had to be authentic to us, meaning we are not taking ourselves too serious, but we are also not too funny. I mean, we could never be Ryan Reynolds funny because that's him. That's what he does. He's amazing at doing that. And if you try to recreate that, not being authentic to yourself, you're going to land on your face, right? So we're not that funny. And LeBron is actually a really funny guy and a really charismatic guy. And Victoria Justice was also in the campaign, and myself. I'm less funny than all of them, but they are authentically. I wouldn't be able to ask LeBron to do anything that wouldn't feel authentic to him in some way related to the brand. That's what I mean by authenticity. Getting all of those factors of what the brand is, what everyone is involved, and package it in a way that audience are going to want to look at this for 60 seconds or 30 seconds.
Well, let me ask, how do you find, when you talk about that authentic messaging, how do you find that right position within, for example, the tequila marketplace? There's 2,200 different tequilas, I think. Like that they also want to have some level of authentic storytelling. And I bring that up because you mentioned Ryan Reynolds. I had the chance to interview the CMO of Mint Mobile on How I Made It in Marketing before, and they talked about kind of the idea behind those campaigns was looking at that, self-service marketplace back in the day and finding, hey, there's this market here for this very low priced offering, but I think if we take ourselves too seriously offering it, no one's going to believe it. And bringing that celebrity and that joke, it was getting across that value proposition of, hey, you'd be surprised how cheap this is. I think one of them was like the Ryan Reynolds and like his daughter shooting the commercial or something, and because they didn't have the budget for a big budget TV campaign like the Verizons or something, as one of them like the ads upside down. So yes, it was Ryan Reynolds. It was funny. It was his authentic self, but it was getting across, okay, here's our unique position in this very competitive marketplace. So for you with tequila, I understand about the authenticity of the story, but how do you fit that within, okay, now there's 2,200 different tequilas I can pick?
Don, you hit it right on the head. Everything starts with product. What is your product and what it is? So you can't. We're an ultra luxury product, therefore I can't market this if it's a 20 something dollar product, right? So it's not even about the fact that we want to look luxury for the commercial to people to understand in the subconscious, but also because it's not authentic to us. Like I couldn't be in like a sports bar and that kind of thing because it's most likely, that audience won't be asking for that kind of, premiumness on an average basis on their well tequila. I would love to access that market, but it's a market that for us, it's quite rough. So if I were to set a commercial that it applies to that, it would be really hard. I think, for example, take the opposite end of where we are, Terramana and The Rock. They are super authentic to their market. I always say The Rock understands his audience amazingly and does a great job at that. But we are different, similar market, similar product. You were asking tequilas, right? So we're just different. So everything starts to a product. So we have a rich history. We are in tune with culture. So we need to make sure that those crossroads always happen for us, because I think that is our biggest differentiator of like having a liquid that won San Francisco Spirits Awards, blah, 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 blah. But also we have some of the guys, investors, like you said, that are literally writing culture as we go. So I can't pretend to not be, or be for everyone. Another thing, right? I could be like evergreen. I'm like, everyone should love me because, that kind of thing. I'm never going to be that guy Because some of my guys like LeBron or Anthony Davis or Bono, who's an investor, or Jimmy Ivan's an investor, they have very strong opinions out in the world. So like they by nature are going to be pulled into the company, but also reflecting on the product.
That's great. I'm glad you say that, because when we talk about a value proposition, we talk about a powerful value proposition, right? It's that for that ideal customer, right? That right product for that ideal customer. And so when you talk about that, in a business meeting, in a conference, at a value proposition workshop, everyone nods their head and agrees, oh, yes, of course, let's focus. But then when it comes down to like, well, wait a minute, we can't turn down that business opportunity. Wait a minute, you're shrinking our total addressable market. What are you doing? And it's like, well, this is what it means to serve an ideal customer. So I love what you're saying, like, hey, there's places we're not going to go. We could maybe get some market share there. We could maybe sell some product there, but we're not going to go because that's not for ideal customer. That's not us. I think that's a great lesson for everyone listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do, you have to show up in your own way, right? For example, like obviously sports for us is a core part of the brand, but like you would think golf might be a little less for us, right? But we love sponsoring female golf tournaments because we show up in our own way. We get a cart and we play music and we have drinks coming out the back, and and we do it. We are playing like like Biggie or Drake, or what I mean, like we're playing like all these like cool songs that you not normally identify with a golf course, but we show up in our own way. So you have to understand who you are, even though you are going to uncharted territories or not your usual. I mean, whoever did it the best, and obviously I have the ability to call him, is Jimmy Iovine with Beats. They did it. They did an amazing ability to open to different markets.
All right, you mentioned who you are. You mentioned Beats. Okay, Beats, I think Dr. Dre, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to this thing of authenticity, I think something we're all trying to figure out, and COVID just threw a whole monkey wrench into it, is how do we show up as our authentic self at work, but do we show up as our entire authentic self? So I think there's elements of me that, I don't know if I want to bring into work. And then I'll give you a quick example from our world, which is very different from yours. But we did this test. It just was a fluke. We used to be an in-person company here in Jacksonville. Our founder moved up, bought a ranch in Montana, and now he wears cowboy hats. So he went to the studio up there. He recorded a video. He was wearing a suit. Something was wrong with the video. He came back. He had his cowboy hat. He's like, forget it. I'm doing this one. And so somehow they ended up having two videos. They tested both of them. And we're like, oh, which will perform better? And, we're all pulling for the cowboy hat because we want to live our best self. And the suit worked better. Now, in that situation, like it was like new traffic. It was YouTube. People didn't know us. I think it's different when they know you. And we're a B2B audience business is a little different, but it does bring to mind, we talk about a tequila brand. People think, as you said, on the golf course or basketball, you're partying, all this fun and stuff. At the end of the day, it's a business. You're in there as a business. And as you mentioned, there is just this intense focus on the founder inside the company and publicly. So for you, how do you balance, and what is the right way to figure out, here's how I show up as my authentic self, but there are certain things where I have to bring this level of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, professionalism to this, which wouldn't be me on the weekend, kicking my feet up or something like that.
So two things on that. First of all, I couldn't care less of the job titles of founder or emperor of the world. I think it's some people hold too much respect or too much personality of their own selves into the job title. It's like when you meet people and it's like, what's your job? And it's just like, I'm a founder. I'm like, that's not actually a job, that is not a job description. That must be said. The other thing I think that helps me a lot, Paul Walker, which is probably one of our biggest investors and someone I consider a little bit of a mentor, he always says perception and reality. And I think that is a very important thing that I take. It's so to your own personality and how you show up. I think there's the perception, to your point, of what a founder should be and the leader and what people look up to or look towards when they're leading their own teams within your company, and what values are you shared and that kind of thing. And then there's the reality, right? The reality has to be also very authentic to yourself, but the perception's real. Like by that I mean, people. If I'm the one taking the time in every email saying please and thank you, I hope that trickles down to the whole company, right? So that is the perception reality. The reality sometimes is that extra second gets me, 10 minutes or an hour later to bed by the end of the day, by all the emails you're done. But you have to make that effort to do that, because I think that is the mix of perception and reality. I would love to answer some emails, yes, no, go to hell. But in the end of the day, it's, thank you very much. I do appreciate your value. I don't think this is the correct way of doing it. I think that is the mix between perception and reality.
No, that's great. Email is something, especially since we don't have our voice and you don't see the person, it could be read wrong if you're not really careful. So I agree. Like, you just want to fire them out, but you're taking that extra time to get that email right.
Yeah.
So speaking of setting that culture, which I think you're talking about, you mentioned embed creative within your business model. So I love this lesson. As I mentioned, sometimes I think founders see other founders, and there's enough articles about it online. You just look at kind of not the soul of what they did, but kind of the infrastructure of what they did. Oh, here's how they set it up. Here's how they went public. Marketers, here's how their campaigns are structured or whatever. But it kind of misses that soul of it. So can you give us a sense, how did you embed creative within your business model?
Well, I don't know if it's by nature or trade, but what I think I do better than amazing team that I have is the storytelling, right? That's what I think I bring to the table. And there's nothing better. Once I had the privilege of asking a big business guy, and I said, "What do you think your superpower is?" And they said, "I know what I don't know." So for myself is, I know what I don't know, but I do know what I know. And what I know is creative. What I know is storytelling. And I believe that storytelling is what saves humanity. And we can get into that another time, Daniel. But, collective imagination is the only thing that humans do that animals don't do. So I grab onto that. I want to build a company that is based on creative, is based on storytelling, that is based on, because at the end of the day, this doesn't work for every company, right? But with alcohol, it's emotional driven. It's a form of art. It's a memory creating product, right? So we buy it because, we had an amazing time, or it's how we met our girlfriend in a bar, or how, that time that I brought it to my friend's birthday and we had the best birthday. So we want to recreate that again, or because that time that I opened it with my best friend and we sat down, it was just the two of us and we had that moment. So it has to be an emotional feel. And to your point of buzzwords, that you don't love buzzwords, but we always say that we are a culture company that is memory making business that happens to sell tequila. And in that basis, therefore, you have to be based on creative, because that's how you're going to get your audience, and that's how you're going to get the sentiment of your audience.
Yeah. And buzzwords are fine. We just want to hear the buzzword. Then let's dig into it. Let's hear the story behind it, right? That's what we do here. We figure out what's the story underneath that buzzword. And I want to talk about this creative. So can you give us a specific example of how you actually execute on that creative? Like some creative idea, how you executed it? Because I think that's a big challenge with those big time thinkers, with creatives. For example, I interviewed John Reed, the CMO of Identified, on how I made it marketing. And one of his lessons was the key to turning great ideas into successful campaigns. You need a door kicker like Hannah. And he told the story of sending a bottle of Jameson into space when he was working for Pernod Ricard. And his point was like, yes, you get that great idea, but then like, here's what it took to actually execute on it. We had the right people in the right place, to hit his words, to kick down the door and to make that thing happen. So can you think of a specific creative idea you had? And okay, well, we got that idea. That's great. But now here's how we execute on that.
100%. COVID. We get the company finance. COVID hits. Are we still launching? We are launching. How are we launching? Well, this is what I do. Tell stories. Let me shoot a video. It'll be a 2.5 minute video. We'll tell the story of why we're all here. And everybody thought I was completely insane. And at the time, I turned to the CMO that we launched with, which is Dia Sims. And I said, well, what story, like, where do I start? And she looked at me and said, the truth is easy to tell. So I said, okay, let's set off to tell the truth. But to your point, I get to Mexico and we started shooting. We shot between Mexico and LA, because the whole idea was like, well, how did I start this company? How did LeBron James get involved? Because those were the questions people were going to ask, right? So I was like, let me do a whole video. It'll be 2.5 minutes for whoever gives a hell about watching this whole 2.5 minutes. And then we'll create 15 seconds, 30 seconds for people that don't have attention spans for more than 3 seconds, right? And then I remember getting to Mexico, and I'm in the production van, and it's a big shoot. Like, it's a pretty big shoot. And I remember being in the back of the van, and I got a little nervous for the first time. And I've directed big shoots and that kind of thing, but there's normally either a client or a producer behind me or someone that I can be like, hey, do you like this? Or if people don't like it, it's like, oh, that's what the client wanted. it was all me. There was the buck stopped with me. Like if I looked behind me, there was a wall. It was just myself. So I remember calling Maverick Carter and saying, "Hey, Mav, like I this is what we're doing. I'm a little, we're telling a story." And he was like, "Do you think this is right? Do you think this is the right way to do this story?" And I said, "Absolutely. I have blind faith. This is what we need to do." And it goes, "Well, then go and do it." So to your point, we were in COVID. We were all wearing masks. It was in Mexico. Then we came back to LA where we shot with LeBron and Anthony Davis and Rich Paul, and they were all there. And it was that table shoot. It happened in a shut down hotel because no one was allowed to have hotels in the Dream Hotel in LA. And so the execution was actually, I was blessed to have a great team and everyone very supportive, but it was not easy.
I like what you say about not having the client, right? So now, yeah, you're the founder. You've got these skills. You've used them previously with producers, whatnot, but it's up to you. You mentioned break down the barriers of titles. So you said founder, that's not really a title. And you go by chief creative officer. So you want to give us a sense of, okay, now, hey, it's kind of your company. It's all in your hands. You have all these decisions. And one of your key decisions is to break down the barriers of titles. Why do you do that? How do you do that? And what's the result?
I think it brings to the point of authenticity. It brings people opinion out. I think obviously as we're growing, that becomes harder. I think also I may not care about the founder, but obviously I understand people's job directions, and I understand that people do have to have different titles for their careers as they move along. But I do think having that idea of like we are a pact, pun intended, of course, because of Lobos. We're a pack, the strongest, we are as strong as our weakest wolf, the internal model of the company, which is for the strength of the pack is a wolf and for the strength of the wolf is a pack. So that idea becomes easier when we're all in it together at the same time. And it's not, oh, no, I only take, I'm only head of trade marketing or I'm only head of consumer marketing and that kind of thing. If we try to work as individuals and not job titles, I think that helps towards that a lot.
You just mentioned that interesting story about COVID, but I got to wonder too. So that was a great example, I think you said, of like, hey, there is this big change in the marketplace. I mean, really the world, right? But we're not changing. However, I got to think when you launch a product, when you launch a brand, you have these ideas, but then you get into the realities of the marketplace and you have to pivot in some way. So I wonder, I'll give you a quick example as you think of any pivot you had to make, but I did a case study with Cisco WebEx about their rebranding, and it was during COVID, and they rebranded from just being known as a web conferencing company to being that one app for everything in a remote or hybrid workplace, right? COVID was a great shift to what they can offer in a whole new and different way that wasn't available before. So for you, again, there's all this background that goes in before launch day. I think the company was around a year before you really even got the product to market. And I think there was something though that changed in the marketplace or in your understanding of customers or whatever it was that made you think, hey, maybe there's a little pivot we need to make here.
100%. So we launched through COVID, like you said, and people ask me, how did you adapt to COVID? I was like, it's the opposite. How did I adapt coming out of COVID? Because we didn't know better. We didn't know a world pre-COVID as a company, right? So 80% of companies of alcohol or revenue of companies in alcohol come from off-premise, right? So things that are outside of bars and restaurants and that kind of thing. So liquor stores and that kind of thing. So we were heavy, obviously, in the off-premise world because there was no on-premise when we launched. Right. So we were happy because our revenue was growing. We sold 8 times what we thought on the first year. We were ecstatic. But then we had to look at ourselves as we were coming out of COVID and be like, hey, people are back in bars and back in restaurants and clubs more than they were before. And we have a presence, but we haven't really focused our sales team, our marketing creative, all the things that go behind that. To that is like, we need to really understand this and who we are in this environment, what we do and that kind of thing, and how we present a POS and all that kind of thing. So for us, it was more of like a focus change. I wouldn't say call it true a pivot, but like, hey, yes, revenue is great and we're hitting our numbers, but we're just hitting our numbers because we are big in our biggest size of the pie. But we, brands are built in the on-premise and sold in the off-premise, right? We can't forget that. And also we pride ourselves on being culture and we're not in where the culture really is. So that was, I think, in Lobos one of our biggest, shifts in attention.
Great. So we just talked about some lessons we learned from some things Diego built. And in just a moment, we're going to learn some lessons from people he collaborated with. I already mentioned a few. But I should first mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MechLabs AI, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. Right now, you can get a free 3-month full scholarship to the AI Guild and a free quick start AI productivity kit at join.mechlabsai.com to help you navigate the artificial intelligence marketing revolution. That's join.mechlabsai.com. All right, let's talk about some more lessons from people you collaborate with. And the really the person I can attribute this to, I think, is your great-great-grandfather. You said, grab the tiger by the tail. So what does that mean, and how did you learn it?
So for me, what it means is, I have this love and this passion for acting, and actually being on movie sets and that kind of thing, which is like my artistic self. But I have this company, Lobos, which is this tiger by the tail. So it's how we have to ride the trains that come in our life and do the best of our ability. So do it the best you can for the time that you have to do it. So as much as I miss being on a set, I have this tiger by the tail, and I'm going to see it through all the way.
So as we mentioned, your career started in acting and directing. And I wonder, was there something specific that you learned from that career that you now apply either as a founder leading your company internally or externally marketing? I know you talked about storytelling. That's obviously a key skill for actors and directors. But the thing that I've noticed in kind of culture or business over the past maybe 10 or 20 years is there's been this great amalgamation. Like there used to be these separate industries. There was like a film industry, there was a TV industry, there was journalism, there was marketing, there was whatever. But all these content creators have kind of just come together now. And there's this overlap where, and like we talked about, an actor is running a business and they're communicating this way. There's one way in a movie, but it's a different way in a commercial, not just as a paid hired hand, but as an investor and part of it. Even on the journalism side, it's become just all content. It's a little unclear what was actual just like straight journalism versus what is more of content marketing. So since we've kind of all come together, I think people like you, these actors, right? These directors, these producers have come more into the marketing world and more into the business world. But I wonder, what is something that you brought from that discipline? Like any specific examples of how you learned something in that discipline and can use it in your marketing and business career?
I mean, the thing that I use the most that I think has surprised people a lot in like pure kind of storytelling movie making is each of our products are a different character and they behave differently and they have different personalities and they do different things and they show up differently, right? So I become quite annoying in like, I think some people's when they have, let's say a mustard company and they have different mustards of different flavors and that kind of thing. They treat them all the same because for consumers, they're focusing on the brand, right? So the brand is, but I actually think what's in the actual glass, what's in the actual bottle changes the personality or the way that affects to the brand or the connection to the brand. So take our Joven, which is means young in Spanish, which is our youngest product, our cheapest product, which is still, $45 in most markets in America. Still quite a lot of money, but it is the one that is the youngest. It's kind of more, flavor forward, and it kind of has more of a vitality. Therefore, it's cocktails and it's fresher. So for me, it has a whole personality. Like for me in my head, that is not a bottle, is an actual person that sits and talks in this different way and that kind of act. So that would be my biggest takeaway. And the other takeaway that I must say now before we go is listen to your mom. So my mom forced me to go to I did economics for a degree as well as acting, and she was like, "You can't just do acting." So I guess that also came in handy. So that would also be another thing that I learned along the way.
So I love what you say. Well, listen, your mom, that's good advice. But I love what you say about the that each one's a character. Like, have you formalized this in some way? Is there like any sort of formal documentation that you use within the organization so everyone understands that?
Yeah, personality, right? We only, when each product has a breakdown, when we give it to agencies or that kind of thing, part of the brand Bible, each product or each SKU will have its personality down to the fact of sizing, right? I don't think, our leader to our 375s have the same personality. Therefore, they show up different. And for our product is, where our ideal placement on a shelf on the back of the bar, where is that our ideal placement? That changes per SKU per type of product. And I think that really shows up in our ideal. Obviously, it's hard to be when you're not the one placing it on the shelf. Hard to get it exactly where you want, but if you don't ask, you won't get.
Right. And I would assume by maybe having the reason behind it, you might be able to influence more where it's placed on the shelf, like bringing them into the story, if you will.
Absolutely. And I always get a crackle, right? I always get a joke. And I think that when people laugh, they tend to have that memory kind of engraved. But yeah, I mean, I do tastings in Total Wines and Binny's in Chicago. And I do that for at the highest level, meaning, the guys that run the whole company to an actual store, right? And when you tell them, it's like, hey guys, I noticed that this is in the bottom shelf, but this should be here because this guy's a little louder and he wants to speak this one and he's more in your face. And then people remember it, and I come back 3-4 months later, and it actually has shift just because they have a reason to be.
So when you say you do tastings at sounds like a local Total Wine more, are you talking about your sales team, or are you saying you personally go around the country and will go into these individual stores and do tastings? Just so I'm clear.
I do it myself. I was in Chicago last week at a Beanie store with both employees. I did a session for the actual, employees inside the Beanies. And then I did one for the actual consumers. It was like 30 consumers that they came by. I did it in Specs in Texas, in Houston the other day. I do a ton of those and I love it.
That's fantastic. So let me ask you, is there anything that's really stuck with you that you've learned from that, like dealing with your channel partners, your retailers, and your customers? Because one of the things, as I mentioned, I think these days we are so stuck behind our digital dashboards, behind these analytics platforms, behind research agencies, behind all of these things, that we haven't done that as much, certainly not at the highest level of the company, let alone, people lower in the company, actually go out, press the flash, be in person with customers, with retailers, with channel partners. So is there anything that sticks out to you like, oh, like actually going out here and being with them, like, I got this idea or I got this better understanding?
Well, for us and for the sake of us talking, I think for marketing is really important because I think sometimes studies or panels or that kind of thing, as great as they are, I mean, I'm a big believer that you can torture data as much as you want to tell it. If you torture it enough, it'll tell you whatever the hell you want to be told. That famous, talking about data, famous Henry Ford quote of, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So I'm a big believer of like the fastest and the best data is from the field, listening into it yourself. So whenever we're developing what our next campaign is, or what is our sales sheet say, or what is our shelf talkers say, when I hear what people are asking me, that's what the questions I want to answer in those shelf talkers and that kind of thing, because that's what matters. And if I hear the same question in 4 different states in 2 weeks, that's the question that we need to answer, right? To people and that's when you only have 2 things to answer. So that for me is one of the most valuable thing. And the second is, we hear what people are thinking competition wise. I love listening to what I always say is like, if you're not drinking Lobos, what else are you drinking and why? And that kind of thing. So I understand a little bit more of someone that's taken the time of a Wednesday afternoon to come to a retail store to listen to me talk, which is, I can't even believe that someone even doing that. If you're doing that, I care a lot about why you're here, what you think, and what else do you behave. So I learn a lot from that.
I think that hopefully that's great inspiration for everyone listening. Don't just be hidden behind any analytics platform. Go out and meet people. That's fantastic. You do that, Diego. Here's another lesson. You said, build something you'll be proud of. I don't remember if we said we can mention who you learned this from, but if you can, please do. And if not, we understand.
No, absolutely. That was LeBron James. When I had the privilege of him wanting, he called me, and he wanted to be an investor, and he said, "I love the product, I love your vision behind it." And I said, "Okay, great. So we're gonna do it for us, for our friends." And he looked at me and goes, "Oh no, Diego, we're building this to take over the world, and we're gonna build this for a company." And he said, "We're gonna build this." Because for him, it doesn't matter, for him, most likely for him, he's been very successful on and off the court. It might change his life. It might change my life, but it won't change his life, even if we are extremely successful. But I think the thing that matters to him is something that we look back 10 years from now and we're very proud of. And that is both in the product, the success, but also in the type of company that we're building.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people listening, especially if they're just on the marketing side, they don't have control over the company like you do. They could say like, okay, I can see being proud of, oh, you whip out that bottle of tequila, you're sitting there with friends, you give it to whoever and you're like, this I made, but can you give us it, like get us into your mind or something specifically you made? How do you build marketing that you're proud of? Because this has been a major change in my career. I started, back when I was doing print ads in the Wall Street Journal, and it was that kind of old school marketing. They bought the Wall Street Journal, right? They weren't looking for my ad. It just happened to be in there. And I got to move into the world of content marketing. And I love content marketing because it is doing what you're talking about. You're building something for people. Like, for example, when we were trying to teach about conversion optimization, when it was a fairly new topic, I wrote a children's book about it. And we probably, here's a children's book about, so a 6-year-old can understand what you do at work every day. Cause I know my kids couldn't understand what I did. And, that was hopefully marketing and it got our message across and our value proposition across. But I, look back on that and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty proud of that. So can you take us into your world a bit and say like, okay, yeah, you can touch and feel the tequila, you can actually drink it, I can be proud of that. But what about the marketing? I mean, we're trying to get people to act in a certain way. How can you be proud of your marketing as well?
I'll give you a great example, and that's the example that I try to recreate. When I was growing up in the 90s, I'm a big sneakerhead. So I would wear the Jordan 1 Chicago, and you would cross someone, it still happens today, you would cross someone on the street and they would look at your shoes and you share that nod, and we all know what that nod is. We've seen that nod. That for me, if we can get someone in the world 5 years from now, 2 years from now, across the bar and someone orders Lobos and someone hears it across the bar and they go and they have that nod, that would be my goal and what it is, something that I'm proud of, because that would mean that they know they share something more than taste for tequila. They know they share a set of values. They share a set of value proposition. They share a set of ideas. And that for me is as a company, as a person, is something that would be worth putting my name to next to in history.
That is a worthy goal, but can you take us into like any decision you had to make or any specific example of something you had to do in your marketing to make that happen? Because one thing that we talk about and teach about and done research about, for example, is customer first marketing. And we did this research where we split Americans into two groups. One was a group of people who weren't happy with a company. The other one was one where they were happy with a company. We asked all these questions. And one of the key differences we found was the people who were happy with the company, it's not necessarily that they only had good experiences. It's they felt like they put the customer first. And so that's something we instill when you're in that marketing meeting, when it comes down to that 50-50 jump ball of what are we going to do in this campaign or the customer experience, how are we going to treat a customer, sometimes take that short-term hit as a company and put that customer first, right? So for you, when you're meeting with an agency, right? Or when you're in that boardroom and they're presenting that campaign to you and they're saying, Diego, here's what we're going to do after the Olympics or whatever it is. How do you make sure then to build that marketing you're proud of, not just the product, but that marketing you're proud of, while still it's got to convert and it's got to sell, right?
100%. But to your point is, you won't, what we said at the beginning, you won't make everyone happy. You need to understand that, right? So we're a company that stands for diversity. It stands for female rights. And, we're 60, I would need to check my last number. So please don't hold me because we've had a lot of hires, but we're about 60% female employed. We're about, 65 to 70% minority owned. And that thing will trickle from the ownership of the company to what we do publicly, right? So I think to your point is that is the value that I think it brings the value, but it also those decisions that you show up. You know what I mean? Like we will be quite vocal about, Pride Month. We'll be quite vocal about female rights. We'll be quite vocal about that. So those campaigns are, when you're in the boardroom and allocated funds to campaigns, those are the ones that are going to take priority because it's both authenticity, it's our value proposition, it's our product, and it's who we want to be in the future.
So when I asked you in the opening about tell us about your day, one of the things you mentioned is it kind of all just flows down to the founder. Like all the problems end up in the founder's lap, right? So I love this last lesson. You mentioned pressure is a privilege, and you learned this from Billie Jean King. So how did you learn this lesson, and how do you live it every day?
I had the privilege of meeting her at the U.S. Open, and it's a quote that she says a lot, and I said, just so you know, it's a quote that I use a lot internally in the company. And she was like, so thankful. It's something that I told myself before every match. The fact that you are there, that you are about to step on that court, it's a privilege, and it comes with that pressure. So I think with our sales team, with our, everyone that is involved in the company in whatever level, we have the privilege to have this pressure. And I take that very, very highly in my order of priorities every day. And it's an honor. And you have to take it twists us around what pressure is. It almost gives it a good connotation, which is a much better, something to empower you instead of to pressure you down, especially to like salespeople. Salespeople like are fighting against a number every month and that kind of thing. And if you give that number something to chase and instead of something that is, in their back, I think is a more positive idea. So that's why I love that quote, pressure is a privilege.
So, we're talking about COVID and now we're in this post-COVID era and there's hybrid work, there's all this stuff. And one of the things that really came up is burnout. And so, I love this idea of pressure as a privilege for you personally, but also I wonder how you use that when you manage your entire company. You mentioned you have a company of about 100, you have 22 people that you're dealing with every day and reporting to. So is there anything you do to engage with your, employees to make sure that pressure becomes a positive thing and it's not being overly negative and pulling them down?
We play unfair. We're an alcohol company, so we're not fair to most people out there. We have the enormous great thing of we always have, parties and events and going on and ensuring that anyone in the region or anyone that wants to come can come to that and enjoy and bring their friends would probably be the biggest tool that I have towards that. Just because, if we are not having fun with our product, who else will be? We have to have our own fun. And we're not a software engineering company, so, that we play unfair in that way. But so that would be the biggest tool is I understand, but also understand kind of each employee's rights and needs and wants. I have a lot of fun working. So for me, the job, life balance, it doesn't really exist because I really enjoy what I do every day. But that doesn't mean for everyone. And some people need more, space in their minds and that kind of thing. So listening to that and trying to work around it would be kind of the more business focused, thing that I do on a daily basis.
Makes sense. So we've talked about so many different things about what you've done with your company, how you built your company, how you built your brand. If you had to break it down, this thing of marketing, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Well, you know what they say, only 50% of marketing works and you don't know which 50, right? One of the qualities, I think, in my opinion, or for what I look every day, it's the teammate, right? So it's knowing what you don't know. So I look at, my head of marketing consumer, Joanna, she is our VP. She's amazing. And I look at her because she's the one going to deploy the creative we do together. Right. So I look at her and be like, hey, what do you need? And she was like, well, I feel I need this and I need that and how that. And then we get together and build from needs to wants, in that way. Right. So I think giving people that are building people that are cooking the meal, they need to buy their own ingredients. You can help them on the inspiration of what the meal is, but they need to buy their own ingredients. So what are you going to need for this meal that we're cooking together, right? So I think, in my opinion, is that teammate, that ability, or the same thing with Elaine King, who runs our trade marketing. What is that summer campaign going to look like? Not look like in actual looks, but what are you deploying? What are you going to ask the sales team to do? What are you going to because then you can build around that creatively, or even to the campaign, even to budgets or even around. So that bottoms up, really, for me, it's the most important thing.
Well, thanks for your time, Diego. Thanks for sharing the ingredients to your success of your company. I learned a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me down.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.